Okay, I think we're going to get started. Thanks everybody for joining us for our webinar on getting started with Copilot from Microsoft 365. I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide. My name is Daniel Johnson, and let's see if we get the slide built there. Great, awesome. So hi everybody, my name is Daniel Johnson. I'm the Senior Vice President for the Western US for Sourcepass. I'll tell you a little bit about Sourcepass here in just a moment. I'm a quick background on me. I'm a 25-year industry veteran, former CEO of Machine Logic, but now deeply rooted in the Sourcepass community. And you often might see me on a couple of industry panels for the managed services industry and cybersecurity industry. But I'm here to also introduce my coworker and good friend, Nathan Taylor. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Nathan.
Thanks, Dan. My name is Nathan Taylor. I'm the Senior Director of Enterprise Solutions for Sourcepass. That means I lead our pre-sales engineering team, and I'm helping lead our Microsoft practice and go-to-market motions. I've got a couple advisory roles with a couple key groups in the industry, including some Microsoft Partner Advisory Councils and PAX 8 partner panels. So excited to be here today. Thanks, Dan.
Awesome. Well, we've got a full agenda today. This webinar is meant to be kind of an introduction to Copilot and some initial considerations as you move into the world of AI and Microsoft. So we're going to go a little bit through a couple of quick introductions on what the product is. We'll see it in action a little bit. We'll talk a little bit about license considerations and some prerequisites. And then we'll talk a little bit about how to best prepare for Copilot, some of the data privacy and cybersecurity considerations that we need to discuss, and then some tips and tricks on getting started with a partner, getting started internally with some pilot groups and teams like that, and then we'll leave some time for some Q&A. Speaking of Q&A, I would encourage you to use the Q&A function that's in the Teams app. We'll be checking that as we go, try to answer as many as we can, and if we have any, if we run out of time at the end, we will definitely follow up with you after the event. Also, our session is being recorded, and we will be sharing that recording after the event as well, probably in a day or so. But let's go ahead and get started with a little bit about Sourcepass. So really appreciate everybody joining us. Sourcepass is one of the fastest growing managed IT service providers in the industry. We focus in on fully managed IT and co-managed IT for small and mid-sized businesses. We've got a very robust cybersecurity practice, including cyber advisory and compliance services, and some specific readiness assessments for things like Copilot and artificial intelligence. We do focus in on some productivity solutions such as Microsoft 365, cloud and infrastructure solutions like Azure, and we spend a fair amount of time working with our clients on digital transformation, moving from kind of legacy IT into the new cloud and modern IT infrastructure that really lends itself to provide businesses with better agility. Behind the scenes, go ahead and go to the next slide there. Behind the scenes, we're just over 550 employees, approaching 600 employees. We have a little over 2,500 clients right now. Our team's operating at well above industry standards, and we really take pride in our customer satisfaction and our net promoter scores. We have a broad team across the US, national reach. We have some international customers as well. We've achieved SOC 2 Type 2 and ISO 27001 certifications, which really lends itself to, as we work with our clients, it gives them the assurance that we've got solid processes, very good cybersecurity posture ourselves, and that we take the matters very seriously. And we cover a wide variety of verticals, over 20 that we focus in, everything from finance and healthcare, manufacturing, government and education, and a broad variety of other industries. So if you're new to Sourcepass, happy to have a discussion and see if we're a good fit for your organization. But as we roll into the Copilot conversation, want to start off, kick things off with a little bit of a sizzle video, and so we'll let this video play.
Whoa. Straight to the top, never going down, don't wait for the drop. Stand still, that's the motto, yeah. Brand new bands for the auto, oh. Foot to the ground, full throttle. Big energy for the night like lotto. Y'all talk lots, never this quiet. Life like a Seinfeld plot. Vault full of songs, all of them bombs. Something like a minefield guy. Boom. Get it, tickets running out quick. Bet it, never get it out big. Said it, never had to shout it. They said I couldn't never do it, okay, how's this? Fit a week worth of work in a minute. Machine well oiled, you know how I stay efficient. To-do list written, I do this different. Hold up, wait a minute, I ain't finished. Okay. Look, flows the same now. Paved the way, the snakes and fakes are chased out. Back to back to back, I changed the pace now. Had to stack the cash until the bank's out. Straight to the top, never going down, don't wait for the drop.
Awesome. Thanks for all that, Dan. It was a fun video. It's amazing all the stuff Microsoft's pulling together to kind of drive the excitement around this tool. And we are excited about it. Copilot's an incredible product. So it'll be fun to break it down with you today. So let's start with just what is Copilot? What does that product mean when Microsoft uses the phrase Copilot for Microsoft 365? What does that product entail? And this graph is a really good kind of high-level overview of what's going on here. Large language models are kind of the core of this, and you've heard of large language models, maybe not in that language, but in the form of ChatGPT is probably the most famous one. And what these are what people are calling generative AI. And what the way these large language models work is they take a giant model and they pull in all kinds of data, all kinds of language, all kinds of documents, and they review all that and they index all that data, and then they build a model off of it. And that model allows that AI then to reference that data and extrapolate answers and even extrapolate next steps off of that data. And so we've seen that for those of you who've played with ChatGPT across that ChatGPT product, where you can go ask it questions about various things and it'll come up with answers. The interesting thing is that most of the time they're true, sometimes they're not. As it's kind of extrapolating the answer, it sometimes embellishes things. It makes logical connections or fills in gaps that are there with its own kind of imagination. So it's a very interesting thing to play with. Hopefully most of you had a chance to play with ChatGPT. And of course, we're seeing that turn up all over the place, where it's on websites and customer service forums where you're really talking with a ChatGPT or a large language model. Volkswagen's putting these tools into their cars. We're seeing it impacting things all over the place. And what Microsoft did is they said, hey, why don't we take that amazing capability to analyze data and generate content, and let's apply it to your corporate data. And so they use the Microsoft Graph to pull in your data. Microsoft Graph is just an interface that Microsoft's built for accessing all your corporate data in your Microsoft 365 tenant. And there's a lot of data there if you fully embrace the Microsoft stack. You've got all your email, you've got all your Teams data, you've got your OneDrive and SharePoint documents, all the things you've created and emailed and shared and interacted over and generated yourselves. Microsoft then goes and indexes all that data, and it pulls it together and adds it to their base large language model. So you get all the capabilities of that language model to be able to respond to various prompts. Then you add in your data, and then they've buried that that capability across all of the Microsoft stack. They've started embedded into various apps, and so they add that to all the data that's on the internet. They're also able to query the data that's on the internet, and they're getting more and more current with the data that's accessible there. And together, they've created this ability for people to leverage all this intelligence that's built into these language models across your Microsoft productivity stack. Where we're seeing this is it really helps in a lot of different areas of business where people are able to leverage it. Marketing teams get immediate benefit from it because it helps them generate content. It's very easy to leverage it on that front. Sales, It's great for writing emails, for optimizing things, sometimes for generating even scopes of work or statements of work based on previous content and optimizing things. It can really help in customer service with referencing knowledge bases and with helping craft better language, that sort of thing. Finance can use it for reviewing data. It can do a lot of stuff with your data, Excel data, other data sources. IT pros can use it to track projects. We're seeing Microsoft leveraging the same thing on the security side. So Microsoft's really trying to embed it in a lot of different workflows. And HR can really help it, use it to help access their data. Microsoft's been running this product for about a year. It's been available in a limited preview for about a year, and it released to the general public in January. And so they've got some data on where people are seeing the value of it. 68% of people said it really improved the quality of their work. 70% said that it made them more productive, and 77% said they wouldn't want to give Copilot up. And so this is from a report that was generated by Microsoft. And having used it for a couple months now, we had a little bit of an early preview to it. It is a product that I really enjoy using, and it does add a lot of value in very specific areas. You start to find yourself relying on it and really seeing the value it brings. And Dan, I'd love to kind of get your thoughts on what are your favorite places where Copilot's just kind of really wowed you a little bit before we get into the feature set, some more personal experience with it.
Sure. Yeah, there's some really interesting use cases out there. I think some of the fun ones for me have been, kind of getting started, breaking through writer's block. So if I'm in Word or even just an email, maybe it's a complex topic that I need to tackle, being able to kind of feed it a framework, maybe some bullet points, and then really have it kickstart me into some creative process on building a complex message. Suddenly you find yourself kind of editing what it's prompting you with, and suddenly you're in the flow, and you're actually producing some good content. So I think that's probably, whether that's in Word or Excel or Teams or any of that, or Outlook for that matter, I think just getting that kickstart is kind of the key for me.
Yeah, similar. I've used it many times for that. I'm similar in that, if you're having trouble getting going, sometimes it's just easier to have the framework, and then you start tweaking the language that it created to make it more yours, and before you know it, you're off to the races and you're in that creative flow. I find it's amazing for just kind of helping aggregate data. We get a ton of Teams messages, a ton of emails, and it allows you to really ask some very conversational questions about that data and get some really great answers. Hey, tell me about this project that I've gotten 60 emails about. We all get in those projects where there's just a million email threads, and it's hard to keep up in a busy world, and you're able to quickly ask it to summarize those conversations, and then you can burrow through in even deeper. If you have something you want to dig into, it'll help you get to that data quicker. I like to use the phrase that generative AI is an accelerator. Just makes things happen quicker, allows you to get things done quicker. And I think that's a big area that we're seeing the impact of it. So let's jump into some of the functionality. Let's start to break down where this tool that we've kind of been talking in these big ethereal terms about, it really impacts you in a day-to-day in the Microsoft 365 stack. Copilot itself has its own interface. It's currently mostly in Teams. You can access it through a web interface, but Copilot is the chat interface to interact with this AI, and you can ask it all kinds of questions. I use it to search for data. I need to find that spreadsheet that Dan sent me 2 weeks ago, and I know it's about a security framework, but I can't remember what email, or was that a Teams message, or what the name of the spreadsheet was. Rather than searching in 3 or 4 places, I can just go say, hey, Copilot, Dan sent me a spreadsheet about security about 2 weeks ago. Can you help me find that? And it does a really good job of pulling that together because it's indexed your data. It knows all the things that I've interacted with and can reference those. It can help you catch up on conversations and catch up on threads, list the last 5 things my boss has communicated to me across Teams and email, and it'll do a really good job of pulling that together. And this is embedded, in Teams and a website. You can hit it on a mobile app. There's a couple different ways you can get to it. And I think it's a really powerful functionality they've built out, and maybe one of the more approachable uses of the product. Very quick and easy to use. There's even suggested prompts to help you learn how to use the AI. And I think that's an area we're all going to have to grow in, which is learning how to interact with these products and learning how to draw the best out of them. I think the next place that people see the most value is Teams. Those of us in this world, spend a lot of time in Teams. We're on conference calls all day. We're having messages back and forth. It's replaced emails for a lot of internal communications. And Teams, Copilot can do a ton of stuff. This is where it really shines. In a meeting, it can help you summarize the meetings. If somebody took a transcript of the meeting, it'll allow you to summarize it, ask questions, get key action points. It does a really great job of pulling together pros and cons, suggested questions, and even what decisions were made, suggesting next steps. It's really powerful in its ability to kind of really navigate meetings and navigate conversations quickly. Intelligent recap. This is the next step of that. Of not only can you interact with it kind of in a more interactive format on a meeting, it also builds out these very detailed recaps of meetings where it tells you who was talking when. It can turn the meeting into chapters. It kind of analyzes the contents. And a lot of meetings have kind of an ebb and flow where we move from topic to topic. It'll identify that, help you kind of build that out, understand what was there, and give you key points, key action items. And you can still use the chat to further dig into those details, maybe figure out if there's a section of the video you want to go back and watch. But this is powerful, especially for those of us who get double and triple booked. Sometimes it's really nice to be able to go audit a meeting quickly, say, hey, I wasn't able to attend it because I didn't know the priority, but I want to know what went on and kind of get the cliff notes of what happened. In Outlook, it's very powerful. It allows you to do to summarize an email thread, suggest action items, follow-up items, that sort of thing. You can use it to help either craft content emails or optimize emails. And I really appreciate this functionality. Sometimes you have to write difficult emails. Hey, I need you to pay that invoice we've been talking about for 2 months. It's getting to the point where we're going to have to start talking about whether we can continue on the project if we don't get payment. You write up kind of your email, and then you ask Copilot to tweak your language, and it's really incredible how it takes the thoughts you're having and puts them into even more professional language. And a lot of us have been writing emails for 20, 30 years, and we know how to write well. But I find that Copilot often has a better tone than me, or finds ways to tweak language in a way that I really appreciate. If you're younger or you have employees that struggle with tone, don't have that experience, don't know how to word things better, it's an incredible asset for them to be able to leverage it to tweak their language and their tone in emails and that sort of thing. And they're building all kinds of new functionality around the meeting following capability, where we'll be able to do some of that functionality we talked about in the previous slide of kind of getting a summary of a meeting, when you can't attend. Tell Outlook to go summarize that meeting for you and get you a follow-up of that. So very cool stuff. Lots of innovation happening, lots of changes coming on this front. So it's very cool to see what Microsoft's building out. Same things can flow into Word. Create a summary of a document or rewrite a paragraph for you. Create some graphics or add some pizzazz to a presentation. You can also, even like you said, Dan, have it build a framework. Hey, I need to write a framework around. I need to write a document summarizing our efforts on this project. Here's what we've done. Can you build me a framework? And it kind of builds that framework with some key points based on other content you've generated, or just industry general best practices, where it understands what a good summary document looks like. You also can do interesting stuff like provide it with the document and say, hey, I need to make a document like this one, but I'd like to change these key details. It'll generate that content for you and then allow you to tweak it further after that. So very cool what it can do there. In Excel, it can do lots of, there's a lot of Excel wizards out there. I'm always impressed with what people can do with Excel. I'm not one of them, but I know that's one of those powerful tools that our industry runs on. All of our industries end up running on a spreadsheet eventually. There's some spreadsheet somewhere running your company. And the ability in Copilot to start to do visualizations, extrapolating out the data, doing some of those complex tasks that some of us never remember how to do. If you do it every day, you know how to do it. But I don't remember how to make every other line be blue as it is in this picture. You can ask Copilot those questions and it can help you get there. It also can give you some interesting insights. Hey, tell me some key details about this data, or I'm looking for the outliers in this data, and it'll do some analytics for you just based on its native functionality and its ability to analyze data. PowerPoint, great for building PowerPoint presentations off documents. You got a Word document, you got an 18-page Word document that's maybe a report on an internal project. You can take Copilot and say, hey, turn this 18-page document into a 10-page PowerPoint. And it'll do a really good job of breaking down that outline, pulling the key details, putting them into a well-organized set of slides. It can put pictures in for you, that sort of thing. Then you can give it additional prompts and say, well, I appreciate what you did here, but I want less data. You added too much data. Can you make this three bullets per slide instead of 5? And it'll go and rewrite it again for you and kind of help you optimize this presentation. Again, none of this is earth-shattering. People who know how they're doing with PowerPoint, good at communicating, can take a document and turn it into a PowerPoint. But even if you're good at it, you've got to read the document and then turn it into an outline and get it into a PowerPoint. Hours of work can be saved here of just like, hey, build this framework for me. You're probably going to want to put your own spin on it, adjust the language, adjust emphasis, maybe change the pictures. But just that ability to quickly go from a document to a PowerPoint and then have a jumping off point that maybe is hours ahead of where you would have been is a powerful functionality built into the platform. Microsoft Loop is a new kind of collaborative brainstorming, note-taking tool that Microsoft is investing in. Really interesting tool. Within Loop is a lot of functionality from Copilot where it can really help you, pull in documents, reference documents, summarize documents, rewrite things. Very cool what it can do in Loop, and I recommend looking up some videos on Loop. I think it's an interesting product. I kind of think of it as a multi-user OneNote with other collaborative features, kind of a group, note-taking and collaborative tool. Very interesting, but Copilot's deeply embedded in that stack and can do a lot of things in that stack. OneNote, similar, you can ask it to summarize or help you kind of analyze your notes, maybe generate content for you. Very cool. You can reference documents, across OneDrive and SharePoint in your OneNote, which can be valuable. So as you can see, we've kind of gone through a lot of the Microsoft stack here where Copilot is starting to be embedded in multiple places. It's touching every aspect of that Microsoft 365 app stack. And so it's a very powerful tool. Pricing is $30 per user per month paid annually. So it's paid up front, which is a little different from most Microsoft licenses as how we are procuring them. But it's available to all customers. And I think the price is pretty reasonable for the functionality. I've seen a couple really great, TCO sort of analysis. And if you can save an hour or two a month, it pays for itself. We also think that it's probably not a tool that you're going to assign to every user. Maybe you got 100 users in your company, 20, 30 of them might actually really embrace the technology and get the value out of it. And there's some really good reporting on the back end on who's using it. But I think it's going to be a tool that some people are really going to take to and it's going to add value. And then there's other people who aren't going to be as adaptive and willing to embrace it or won't find the value in it, or maybe it doesn't hit their workflow in the same way. So Dan, it sounds like we got some questions bubbling up.
Yeah. I just wanted to go over a couple of questions that we received. Some great questions in there. Aaron's keeping us hopping on a couple of them. So thank you for that, Aaron. Couple of questions that he brought up. One is, how different is GitHub Copilot from the regular Microsoft Copilot? And the way that I've seen GitHub is it's far more focused on the developer community. A little bit more focused on code generation compared to the broad language model that is being presented for Copilot for Microsoft 365. A little bit more general purpose, general use, where you're going to see the GitHub a little bit more focused. And also kind of the idea, somebody posted a question on, can I build my own chatbot or can I build my own modules, that sort of thing. So yes, as you find interesting use cases or specific use cases for your business, there is a tool called Copilot Studio. We're not covering on this call, but it's a great idea for a follow-up. But Copilot Studio allows you to build some of your own queries, some of your own functions, tie that into other applications, and kind of expands that Copilot universe for your organization. So great questions. Keep them coming.
Yeah, absolutely.
Back to you, Nathan.
We'll get into some of that that first question around Copilot for GitHub. You know, Copilot's this brand that Microsoft's doubling down on, and you're going to see it multiple places. There's Copilot for GitHub, which is, like you said, developer focused. Copilot for Microsoft 365 is within the productivity apps. There's just Microsoft Copilot, which is basically a corporate chat GPT, and we'll circle back to that. They're coming out with Security Copilot. There's Copilot for sales that's tied into the CRM. So you're going to see lots of different angles on that, and I think it really comes down to context. Where is that version of Copilot being leveraged? And great question about the content. I think there's going to be a lot of interesting development on looping in your data sources to Copilot so that it can reference it. Very cool stuff. All right, next, let's talk about some of the licensing details. As we talked about, it's $30 per user per month. It's an add-on license paid annually. It builds on top of, you need to have some Microsoft licensing in place. Your Office 365, E3, E5, or Business Standard are available, but we really recommend that you're on one of the more full-featured licenses with Business Premium or Microsoft 365, E3, or E5. And there's a couple reasons for that, and we'll dig into that as we go, but part of that is the security controls that those platforms, those license stacks give you are critical once you introduce Copilot. And those more basic SKUs just don't have the security controls you need to run your business securely, but also Copilot securely. Also, those upper level stacks also include more of the Microsoft stack, and the real value of Copilot comes from leveraging more of the stack. Having more features on the Microsoft side means it has access to more of your data, and there's more places you can leverage the capabilities. There's no minimum currently on purchasing those licenses. I don't see that changing. We're going to be able to sell 1 or 2 licenses, and that's one of our go-to-market plays is, hey, start a pilot group, get a couple licenses, play with it, start to understand how it fits your business. But you can't buy more copies of Copilot than your prerequisite SKUs because you're basing it, it's bolting on top of another license. The user needs to have a Microsoft license of some sort to leverage Copilot. What about the branding? What about the different products? So this is a really important slide. Microsoft, as we talked about, that Copilot brand is appearing all over the place. We're seeing third parties use it. So it's important to understand, and it can be confusing, especially since Microsoft has consumer products as well. So there's a Copilot Pro, which is a consumer product. So we're not talking about that today. We're talking about corporate business Copilot. So there's Microsoft Copilot, which is free. It's available to anybody with a Microsoft or an Office 365 license. It's basically a corporate commercial data protected chat GPT instance. And so anybody can use that copilot.microsoft.com, sign in with your Office 365 account, and you now have access to a full GPT-4 chat GPT interface, but it's protected. Your data is not leaving your tenant, and that's critical. There are some big concerns about sensitive corporate data being uploaded to public large language models like ChatGPT, and it's important that you start to teach your users to use the sanctioned and protected versions of these language models in ChatGPT. So Copilot is that. Sign in with your work account. You're able to search the web, run all the ChatGPT functionality, but all of that functionality stays within your tenant. So that's a critical thing. What does Copilot for Microsoft 365 add? What does that add-on license do? It gives you enterprise-grade data protection. And what that means is Microsoft is honoring all of the security controls in Microsoft 365 with Copilot. So Copilot will index all your data, but it's only going to give you access to the data you have access to. So it's only going to index the SharePoint sites and OneDrive data that I have access to. I don't get the HR data indexed. I can't reference that data because I don't have access to it. It's only my data. So as we build out SharePoint security controls, we're locking down our SharePoint sites so that the right people have access. As we implement things like sensitivity labels for highly sensitive data, Copilot honors those those security controls. It honors your conditional access policies about requiring MFA to log in and accessing only from trusted devices, those sorts of things. Copilot for Microsoft 365 also opens up that graph capability. As Dan mentioned, hey, you want to add some of your, you want to build a database and add, maybe your knowledge base to Copilot. You can do that through the graph, and that's a Microsoft 365 Copilot functionality. The embedding in all the Microsoft apps, your Outlook, your Teams, your OneDrive, that's a Copilot for Microsoft 365 functionality, as is Copilot Studio. And as Dan mentioned, Copilot Studio is great for building additional data sources, building custom prompts, that sort of thing, and really starting to extend out Copilot to fit your business itself. So we talked about Copilot is built on top of Microsoft's comprehensive approach. So we've got security, compliance, privacy, and responsible AI. And those are all related topics, but they are critical to talk about. So security is really talking about, hey, are we, can people just use it from their home computer and access my corporate data? Well, if you've built out your Microsoft security posture properly, no, it requires a compliant device, an MFA, and it's going to lock down their access. Compliance, it'll honor all the compliance controls we can build in Microsoft around DLP and sensitivity labels, and it honors all of Microsoft's logging to make sure that it's all that activity is logged, that you can go review that and audit that from a security perspective. From a privacy perspective, Microsoft is pledged to maintain all the privacy on your data. Your data is staying in your tenant. They're not training their model off of it. They're not sharing it with anybody else. They're keeping your corporate data in your corporate instance of Copilot for Microsoft 365. So you've got that, you've got users who are writing proprietary code for you, and you're using Copilot to kind of optimize some of that code, or maybe some intellectual property in Word, and you're reviewing some of your documents related to that. You can trust that Microsoft's committed to keep that data sensitive and trusted inside of your tenant. And then the responsible AI approach. Microsoft's put a lot of effort into their approach on making sure AI is used responsibly. They're on the forefront of this. They've put out some really interesting documents about governance and ethics and these sort of things, and so they're really trying to make sure that it's well governed. Here's another slide that really kind of covers that. They work hard to make sure that their content is fair, it's reliable and safe, it's private, secure, it's inclusive, and really covering, trying to be transparent and accountable about those efforts. And if you're watching the news, there's some other big names in the industry that are really struggling with some of these layers. So they've released an AI assistant that is not responding in ways that people are happy about. It's coming up with some pretty crazy responses, and Microsoft has put a lot of effort in here. I'm sure we'll see some ebbs and flows as the models change and as things change, where they have to tweak things. These language models are very much almost a live entity, but Microsoft works very hard to make sure that it's very clear on what they're doing and how they're approaching these things. Commercial data protection. Anywhere you're accessing Copilot, if you're signed in, it's protected. So this covers Microsoft 365 Copilot and then just standard Microsoft Copilot that everybody has access to. If you're signed into your mobile app or the website with your corporate account, Edge, Bing, Windows, the website, because Windows also has access to Microsoft Copilot if you're running Windows 11, those are all tied into that commercial data protection, which is a key detail. If we can stay signed in, we now know that our data is not getting just launched into those larger language models for others to work on. A big piece of deploying Copilot for Microsoft 365 is readiness. We really want to make sure that we put in those security controls. Obviously, the basics are critical, where we need multi-factor authentication. We want to see if we can build in some, trusted device sort of conversations. We can start to dial in some of that functionality. But if you want to be secure, as we always recommend, you really want to be running one of the Microsoft 365 suites. Business Premium, E3, E5, they come with additional capabilities like conditional access policies that can be very, very focused on who can access what, where, under what circumstances. Terms of use, we can require people to agree to terms of use. We can put DLP policies that limit data loss prevention policies that limit what happens with sensitive data. We can put in sensitivity labels that put encryption on that sensitive data. We can do e-discovery, litigation hold, those sort of things. Those premium licenses really are needed to build out those functionality. And as you can see here, the same is true across the more enterprise-y SKUs, moving from Office 365 E3 to M365 E3 and E5. E5 adds some really great capabilities around sensitivity labels that are automatic and app discovery. So there's a lot of capability in the Microsoft stack, and Copilot leverages all of those things. But as we go towards preparing for Copilot, that becomes something that we want to really start to dig into. As we mentioned earlier, Copilot is an accelerator. It accelerates your access to your data. So one of the scenarios you got to think through is maybe you have some data in a SharePoint site that everybody has access to, but nobody has gone and looked for that SharePoint site. It's some SharePoint site somebody spun up on a team sometime, and nobody's really paying attention, and it's over in the corner, and it's not a big deal. Well, Copilot changes that equation because overnight it indexes that, and it'll start answering questions on that data. So that data that everybody has access to that was in a corner where nobody noticed is now going to show up in responses in Copilot. And so it's important that we go have a conversation about data. Where is our data? What is our data? What data do we have that's sensitive? Do we have it properly secured? Have we reviewed that? Are we going and finding that data and make sure it's moved into the right places? There's a whole readiness assessment that we can help you with. It's critical to broad adoption of Copilot because it does accelerate people's access to your data, and it's an important variable to really evaluate. We will review sharing permissions in OneDrive and SharePoint, start doing encryption of sensitive data, update your data loss prevention policies, talk about a retention policy, that sort of thing. Lots of important details to review as we go deeper down the Copilot deployment. And this is really a win for you as it really raises your cybersecurity maturity. Data governance is Control 3 in the CIS Top 18. And it's a critical thing that small business needs to start embracing, really understanding where our data is, which parts of those data are sensitive and need to be controlled, and do we have the proper controls, whether that's permissions or encryption. Copilot then drives forward, our need for security maturity across the board, really start to evaluate where zero trust starts to factor in, that sort of thing. Do we have the right compliant device policies? Are we running mobile application policies on mobile devices to control which mobile devices have access? All of these things are an important part of that cybersecurity maturity, and Copilot, is accelerating our need to go down those maturity models and grow in our Microsoft security. We also are opening up a new area, which is, as you mature in your cybersecurity policy, security policy becomes a critical piece, right? And so Copilot drives the need for an acceptable use policy so people can understand what they're doing with Copilot. Data encryption policy, that sort of thing. And really kind of a broader approach on policy so that our users understand what it means to responsibly use Copilot, responsibly access our data. These are maturity levels that we all need to grow in having better policy. As you dig into any security framework, policy becomes a key thing to really grow in. And Copilot is a great moment to really dive deeper on those functionalities of making sure you have the right policies in place. And we can definitely help you navigate that journey as well. Common questions we hear: who do I give Copilot seats to first? How do I get employees up and running? And what are ways to measure impact? Dan, I've been talking a lot. Do you want to kind of touch on this slide here?
Yeah, no problem. I mean, it's very common. Okay, I get Copilot. I think I've got the licenses put together. Yes, I'd like a little bit of help kind of preparing my environment, but I've got a lot of business units clamoring for the tool. And what's the best way to approach this? Do I just turn it loose on everybody? There's a lot of features. How do I get a grip on what are we doing over time? And so, I think there's some great approaches to that. If you want to advance to the next slide, we kind of go through a couple of kind of the typical 3-phase approach, which is one, kind of get the readiness component, get the environment kind of prepared. But then, like Nathan's been mentioning, the idea of putting together pilot groups. So maybe concentrate a few licenses on a couple of key teams that can provide some feedback. Perhaps start a Copilot or an AI council so you can discuss how AI is going to be used in your environment. What are the features within Copilot that you might focus on? For instance, you might want to put out some initial training on how to use it with Outlook and Teams, since that's one of the most common use cases. Get those teams using that, build some muscle memory with it, put out some best practices, and then as you invite others into the fold, now you've got some training that you can do as you move into kind of an adoption phase. So you kind of have your power users or your product champions kind of driving that initial effort. But then as you move into adoption, there's some great best practices on creating teams to have Copilot discussions, maybe a little bit of a Copilot help desk, so that those product champions can come in and assist other users with using Copilot to the best of their ability. It does help to manage expectations so that people aren't just going through and turning on every feature and trying to figure it all out at once. Even coming up with perhaps a monthly cadence on, hey, we're going to jump in and look at how Copilot is used inside of Word, and then the following month how it's used inside of Excel, and kind of unlock that feature set for your organization. We think that yields much better results than just turning it on and having it be the wild, wild west. And kind of getting into measurement, there is a Copilot dashboard and some back-end reporting. I know there was a question on that I haven't answered yet in the Q&A. But there is some reporting that you can see. You can see what type of queries, what kind of data is being accessed, who's accessing that data. And while that is necessary for security and admin purposes, it's really good for adoption purposes because you can see where your user population or your employees are starting to use the tool, where you can focus your efforts on education and on adoption. So. And then I think it's they make a suggestion here, the last little bullet point, which is kind of celebrate the success. So I think there's some interesting things that you could do to foster use of the tool. For instance, highlight best use. Maybe somebody did something amazing in PowerPoint, or took a sales forecast and did some projections inside of Excel. Maybe they figured out a great way to use that's relevant to your business. I think it's great to highlight those capabilities, and that kind of builds another set of power users in each of those departments and each of those workflows. So I think it's a great opportunity there. So hopefully that kind of covers that a little bit.
Awesome. Well, why don't you also touch on some of the ways they can find out more?
Yeah, so we've got some great resources that we put together. Like Nathan mentioned, most users can, if you've got a 365 subscription, if you're logging into the Microsoft Cloud environment, you can start using Copilot right away in a protected manner. Go to copilot.microsoft.com inside of Edge, and you'll have a great experience there. You can also, inside of Edge, you'll see a little Copilot icon, and you can scroll up when you're doing a search within Edge. And it'll take you to that Copilot chat interface. And you can start interacting with the tool. There's also some helpful, getting started links within that screen that'll kind of guide you on some typical uses and kind of how to start with prompts. If you want some product information, some general overview, we do have a link here. We will include these links in our follow-up email, so you don't need to be scribbling down these big long URLs. So stay tuned for a follow-up email from us on that. But there's some great information there on the Microsoft website as well. They actually have an adoption kit too that kind of guides you through some of those best practices we just went through, that 3-phase adoption approach, and kind of also how to get your environment ready if you're going it alone. Of course, we'd love to have you reach out to us as your Microsoft partners so that we can help you through that preparation phase and that deployment phase and the adoption phases. And you can read a little bit more about how we approach that on our Copilot readiness page at sourcepass.com/Copilot. So I'd be happy to there's a form you can fill out on that page as well if you need to reach out for more information or if you'd like to have a conversation with our team. I think our next slide is our Q&A slide, right?
Yes, sir. We've got a bunch of questions, so
yeah, we have some great questions, and I
might and start to dig into those.
Yeah, there's quite a few of them.
Yes.
And I might just kind of reiterate a few of them. One is interesting. The first one's from Dustin is, will Copilot replace my trusted Microsoft partner? And I would say probably not. We're here to be a guide. We're here to help enhance your experience and your journey along the way. And so I think it's key that you have a strong AI strategy in place, that you know where you're headed, that you're not just suffering from bright shiny object syndrome, which is, oh, this is new and neat and I bought it and now I don't know what to do with it. And because there are some aspects of Copilot and AI in general that can represent some risk, like Nathan's mentioned. So it's mitigating that risk, it's preparing for that, but also preparing your user population for that. And that's where we can lean in and help. We covered a little bit on the GitHub question, so I'll probably defer on that one. And then there was a few questions about a real great one on is Copilot HIPAA compliant? And kind of I'll lead off my answer, but I want to ask Nathan for his response on this too. I kind of mentioned that HIPAA compliance broadly relies on setting up the proper security controls within your environment, both the 365 environment and your cybersecurity tool set. But that also comes along with, HIPAA compliance also comes along with the need for policies and workflow to be successful with that. But what's your take on whether it's HIPAA compliance or any other regulated industry when we start introducing AI tools into this? What's your take on that, Nathan?
I think you're right that it's going to rely on the basic security controls. I mean, HIPAA compliance has a lot to do with, where's my data, who has access to it, what controls do I have about that, what training have I done? So I'm with you that I think getting your tenant to be closer to the, dialed into HIPAA policies and controls is a critical step, and Copilot will honor those controls. But I think on any security perspective, you're going to have to evaluate that. How does Copilot change that? What it does is it kind of breaks down barriers to accessing data and barriers between tools. And so it is important to really evaluate that and look at that in a broader sense and understand your current HIPAA controls really cover for that scenario. And I think it's an area we're all going to have to grow in over the coming years as we just see how AI changes our world. But I think the key detail there is build out your HIPAA controls in 365, and Copilot is going to honor those in a pretty safe way.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think there's a lot that, when you're in any type of compliance environment, we have to be very careful about preparing the environment before we introduce new features into it. One person had asked if Copilot works on lower versions of Windows software such as Vista or XP. And my strong suggestion is to update those systems. Vista and XP and even Windows 7 and 8 have all long gone end of life and end of support. So it's very important to upgrade to the latest version, keep your systems patched and updated, latest security updates, latest feature updates. It's in your best interest to do that before you introduce a new tool like Copilot into your environment. So again, that's where a capable partner can lean in and help you with those conversations. So
I can't help but wonder if somebody's having a little fun with us, which I can appreciate.
Maybe, yeah, maybe just a little bit. There was a question on will Copilot work on any device such as phones? And yes, there is a mobile app for Copilot. And again, it follows kind of the security controls that you set up within the Microsoft 365 environment on who has access to that tool and whether you can load that on a personally owned device, that sort of thing. That'll kind of come down to your Intune policies and how you deploy that. And then there was another question too.
Well, on that question, Dan, real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
The functionalities built mostly into the apps. So if you want to use it on a mobile device, you want to use it on a Mac, like you said, there's a Copilot app. But like all the mobile devices on all the apps on the mobile devices, Outlook, Teams, they're all starting to integrate that Copilot functionality. So it works on all kinds of devices. We have Mac users who are taking advantage of it. You will have to put yourself on, the newer versions of those apps. So you need to use new Teams, which is the standard now. You need to use new Outlook, that sort of thing. So there's some caveats there to make sure you're on the latest and greatest products from Microsoft. You have to be on the right release ring. But the apps are updating with all kinds of Copilot functionality all the time. And as you said, Dan, that really goes back to your controls and policies around that. Hey, you can use it on any device, but do you have a mobile application management policy to make sure it's only used on the right devices? Is a really important question to discuss. And then you want to stay signed in. You need to be signed in to those apps. Copilot on your mobile device will function, but it's functioning as a consumer account until you sign into the work account and enable those controls.
Yeah, it's a great call out. And there's I think we're just going to see Copilot weave more and more into the 365 application stack as we move forward. We're already seeing it in other related stacks like Microsoft Dynamics and a couple of the other key places. We talked about GitHub a little bit as well. Somebody asked, how soon can we get going on Copilot? The $30 paid version and not the free version. That product is available now. So you can reach out to us and we can kind of step you through what it needs as far as base licensing, like we talked about. We'd love to see you have Microsoft 365 Business Premium or better. So we have the right security controls in place, but it is available and transactable now. As mentioned, it's $30 per user per month, but it's paid up front. So it's essentially a $360 annual license right now. We think over time that might change. That might turn into more of a monthly license. I think Microsoft's taking kind of a pragmatic approach on early adopters and kind of some of their compute capacity to kind of throttle usage a little bit. But yeah, that's available now, so we're happy to chat with you. But I would also encourage you to have a conversation with your Microsoft partner on getting ready. Making sure that your environment is ready from a security and privacy standpoint. So,
yep. There's a few more questions I threw in here, Dan. There's questions about Security Copilot. I think that's a very exciting product. It's a separate product. It's Microsoft's applying that large language model to their security platform. I think that's going to be very much tied to how deeply you're engaged on that Microsoft platform. I also think it's going to be a little bit more enterprisey at the beginning. So some of us in the small business space might not have as much functionality from the beginning, but it'll be interesting to see as they go live with that product. I'm very excited to see how that product is able to recommend security changes to improve your posture, but also analyze some of the data coming in across that Microsoft security platform. Q asks, does Copilot have the capability to process data the way a SQL instance can and query the data? Does it bring up a SQL instance in the background and utilize it to process the data? The background mechanics of it is something Microsoft doesn't share much with us, so I don't think there's a SQL database in the background. I think it's a much more of a large language model, whatever functionality that's built on. So there's no access to the backend data stores on our end. You're able to query it with the Copilot interface and build custom queries. You can give it additional data, and I think that's an area, as we mentioned earlier, that there's going to be a lot of development on. Building out Graph API connectors, building out third-party connectors where you can pull in your data from your CRM or your ERP or your database. But I think that's also early days where people are starting to build that out and learn about that. I think there's some important things to be learned on that front around, data control. Who has access to the data? How do we make sure that the right people have access to the right data? You plug in your giant SQL database to Copilot and it indexes it. You need to make sure you understand who has access to what after that. So I think that's an area we're going to see a lot of development this year on is third-party data sources and how we interact with them and secure them. Tim Choquette asked about tools to provide SharePoint insights. Microsoft has some decent tooling on that front with Purview and a couple of those functionalities. Some of the more advanced functionality there. It requires the advanced E5 license. So we are also looking at some third-party tools to do some SharePoint insights, such as Cyrisma and AvePoint. There's a couple other players that are building that functionality, and we're gonna leverage probably one of those third parties to help people with their data governance scans, just to make sure we can cost effectively help customers really understand where their data is. I see a comment here from Anonymous about, is Copilot really GPT-4? I feel like I get different responses. This is a theme I've seen recently where people who are hardcore into the full ChatGPT and try to do the same things in Copilot feel like there's slightly different variations on it. And I don't really have a strong answer for that. I'd love to kind of see if somebody has kind of dug into that. My guess is that because we're using a corporate ChatGPT, it's kind of dialing in its focus a little bit. And so you're going to get different responses. According to Microsoft, we're getting the full ChatGPT 4, but I would guess there is a delay in how quickly Microsoft is deploying the updates OpenAI is making on the ChatGPT side. I'm guessing ChatGPT can be very agile and updated quickly because Microsoft has it integrated. They probably have to, they're a few functionalities behind, however sprints behind maybe. But I think that's a great question. My understanding is it's full ChatGPT 4, but I've heard that feedback too, that when you're really using the finer details of ChatGPT, that it's a little bit better than Copilot. But I also think that's a great conversation point, which is I think Copilot's not meant to be the latest and greatest and best AI in the world. It's really meant to be a assistant for your knowledge work, for your users to be working with their data, working within the context of the apps, and being more productive. It doesn't have to be the ultimate AI. You want it to be consistent and trustable and private and drive productivity on your front. And so I think there's an interesting play there. We'll see how closely Microsoft keeps up with the evolution of those tools, and what the differences are is an interesting little piece of conversation there.
Yeah, that's a great answer, Nathan. So we're just coming up to time here. So if you want to advance to our last slide, I do want to kind of jump back and talk about Tim Choquette's question a little bit, because it does bring up an interesting point. As we do the data analysis and look at data privacy within the organization, we certainly need to do that as part of our readiness assessment before we really start to deploy licenses en masse. But there's also this conversation about, well, we need some ongoing review of that data to make sure that we are maintaining that level of privacy, that we're maintaining that level of security, and kind of that role that the partner plays to help that customer along that journey. Maybe as we kind of close things out, if you would like to touch on that, and then I would just invite everybody, if you want more information, to go visit our website at sourcepass.com/Copilot. But go ahead and give us just some closing thoughts on that, Nathan, on kind of that ongoing need for data governance, and then we'll turn everybody loose.
Yeah, appreciate it, Dan. I think as we've been looking at, what does it look like for a business to embrace Copilot? There is, as you talked about, some phases. Are you doing a pilot? Are you making sure you have some basic controls in place? Okay, now deploy some licenses and start to ramp up your usage. But I don't think Copilot is a turn it on and walk away sort of product. We see it as a long-term ongoing engagement, because that data governance is something you're going to need to revisit on a regular basis. Let's go check and make sure our data is still in the right places. It's not a one-time effort. Users are going to require training. This is a learning curve for all of us. Those of us that have been using it for a couple months are still learning every day. I'm starting to have to rewrite the way my brain goes to do things, because Copilot's changing things, and I've been doing things one way for 20 years, and it's time to think differently about things. And so I think that's going to happen to all the people adopting this product. So as you get a company, a customer, or you start deploying it internally, there needs to be ongoing enablement and training of, like, here's how you use the basic functionality. Here's how you use the new feature Microsoft launched this week, because they're going to keep adding features regularly. Here's how you learn to write better prompts. Here's how you write better documents with Copilot. I think there's an ongoing engagement, and that's how we see it as, hey, we're going to help you make sure you're ready, that there's no major gaps in your approach. Now let's do an ongoing engagement to dial all these things in over time. And I think you'll get a lot more value out of the product if you approach it as an ongoing enablement and personal and corporate growth opportunity to learn things and grow and leverage it in new ways.
That's a great wrap for our conversation. I wanted to thank everybody for joining us. I want to thank you, Nathan, and the team here at Sourcepass for helping us put on this webinar. We'll have some new webinars coming your way soon. We have a learning series that's targeted towards our everyday employee that's just trying to make the best of their day. And we do have these digital transformation series where we talk about some of these larger efforts and how we can transform your business over time. If you want to learn more about Copilot, please visit sourcepass.com/Copilot. If you'd like to learn about some of our other events, you can go to sourcepass.com/events. We have a nice list there, and we'll be exploring some more Copilot topics in the future, so stay tuned. Thanks again for joining us, everybody. Have a wonderful week and hope to see you soon. Thanks.
Thanks, Dan.